the second I pushed open my own front door in Brookline. I knew something was off. I'd been gone for 13 days, 6 of them in a hospital bed at Mass General after they replaced my right hip, 7 more recovering at my older brother Howard's place up in Portland, Maine, while I was learning to walk again with a cane. Howard had driven all the way down to Boston to pick me up from the hospital. 5 hours in traffic. He's 71 years old, retired postal carrier, and he showed up without me even having to ask. That tells you everything you need to know about Howard. My son-in-law did not pick me up. My daughter Lauren called the night before and said he had a project deadline at his consulting gig, and that they would make it up to me later. I took an Uber, $48, and a driver who didn't speak much, which, honestly, was a blessing. And let me pause for a second here, because I want you to really sit with this moment with me. I'm a 67-year-old man. I've worked in tax accounting for 38 years at the same firm on State Street. I paid off my house in 2018. I own that brownstone outright, and I'm being driven home from major surgery by a stranger. If you're watching this and your own kids treat you that way, I see you. I really do. We'll come back to that. So I get inside, and the very first thing I notice is the smell. Not bad. Just not mine. There's a candle burning somewhere. Something with vanilla and lavender. My late wife Diane never burned candles. She had asthma. I never started after she passed because the smell of those things still reminds me of hospital corridors and waiting rooms. The kitchen light was on. It was 2:15 in the afternoon. The house faces east-southeast. We get sun pouring through those bay windows until almost 5 o'clock. Why was that light on? Small things. Tiny things. The kind of things you only notice when you've lived in the same house for 33 years, and you know every floorboard that creaks, every draft, every spot where the radiator clanks at night. I set my duffel bag down by the door. I called out. Nothing. Lauren works at a pediatric dental office in Cambridge, Tuesday through Friday. She wouldn't be home until almost 6. My son-in-law Trevor, his schedule had always been a mystery to me. He'd been between opportunities more than he'd been employed in the 2.5 years since he and Lauren moved in with me, after what Lauren had called a difficult patch. I'd stopped asking for the specifics a long time ago. A father learns when to stop pulling on threads. Or so I thought. I made my way slowly down the hallway toward my study. That cane was killing my wrist already. My study. I want you to picture it. I've kept that room exactly the same since 2003. Dark walnut desk. Diane picked it out at a estate sale in Newton, when Lauren was still in elementary school. Her reading chair sits in the corner. A forest green wingback with a worn spot on the right armrest, where she always rested her tea. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A framed photograph of the two of us at Acadia National Park. Summer of 1990. The summer before Lauren was born. That room is the closest thing I have left to my wife. 22 years after the cancer took her. 22 years. And the door was locked. Not stuck. Not warped from August humidity, the way old Boston houses do. Locked. With a brand new deadbolt, mounted at eye level. Shiny brass. The kind you grab off the shelf at Home Depot on a Saturday morning when you've decided that something belongs to you. I just stood there. I literally checked the brass numbers on the hallway wall, as if I might have walked into the wrong unit of my own house. Then I knocked. Nothing. I knocked harder. Now, I want to share something here, because if you're watching this from anywhere in America, and especially if you're an older parent who took in adult children just for a little while, please listen. The moment you find a lock you didn't put there, your house has stopped being yours. That's a line, and once it gets crossed, getting back across it costs more than you think. I went looking for Trevor. He was downstairs, in my finished basement, headphones on, watching something on a laptop. He didn't hear me come down. I just stood there in front of him, until he finally looked up and pulled one earpiece off. "Oh," he said, "you're back. Not welcome home, not how's the hip, just, you're back." Like I was an Amazon package he'd forgotten to track. I asked him about the lock on the study door. He set the laptop aside slowly, the way people do when they're picking words like they're picking glass out of a cut. He told me his mother needed a place to stay. Temporarily. He told me it had just made sense to use the study since I wasn't there. He told me my things were stored in the utility room next to the laundry. Now, I want to be very specific about what happened inside me at that moment, because it matters for everything that came after. It wasn't anger. Not yet. Anger came later. What I felt first was something colder. It was the feeling of looking at a stranger, wearing your own shirt. I asked him when exactly he'd planned to mention this to me. He said they were going to explain everything once I got home. I asked him who installed the deadbolt. He said he did, because his mother needed her privacy. Privacy. In my house. I just nodded. I walked back upstairs, slowly, one step at a time because my hip was screaming. I sat down at the kitchen table, and I looked out at the backyard. The Japanese maple I planted the year Lauren turned 6. The flower beds Diane started the spring of '94 that I've kept up every single year since, and I thought very carefully about the kind of man I wanted to be in the next 10 minutes. If you're in this situation right now, here's what I'd tell you. Do not explode. I know you want to. I wanted to. The only thing rage does in this scenario is hand them ammunition. Calm is a weapon. Documentation is a weapon. Patience is a weapon. Use them. Lauren came home around 5:40. I was still at the kitchen table, hadn't really moved. My hip was throbbing now, and honestly, I was waiting. She came in through the side door, saw me, and stopped dead. "Dad," she said, "how was the ride home?" I told her I'd taken an Uber. I told her to sit down. She sat. She wouldn't look at me. She kept staring at her own hands, and then she said something that I've turned over in my head almost every single day since. She said she'd known I was going to be upset, but she'd hoped that once I saw how nice it looked, once I met Beverly properly, I'd understand. Beverly. That was her name. I'd met her exactly one time, at their wedding in 2018. I asked Lauren when she'd made this decision. She said they'd been thinking about it for a while. Beverly had been renting a basement apartment in Worcester. The landlord had sold the building to a developer. She had to be out by month's end. Lauren said it was supposed to be just a few months. I asked her why she hadn't called me. I had a phone. She had the number. I'd been at Howard's, not on Mars. She said she hadn't wanted to worry me while I was healing. I asked her if she truly believed that finding a deadbolt on my study door was less worrying than a phone call. She didn't answer that. Couldn't. I told her I wanted that lock off the door by morning. I told her I needed to sleep. We'd talk tomorrow. She nodded. She said, "Of course, Dad," and reached over and touched my hand. And I let her, and I went upstairs to bed. I lay awake until almost 3 in the morning, and what kept turning in my mind wasn't even the lock. It was the timing. My surgery had been on the calendar for 4 months. Lauren knew the exact dates, which meant the decision to bring Beverly into my house was made deliberately while I was either anesthetized in a hospital bed or recovering at my brother's. Timed, so that by the time I got home, the situation would already be a fact on the ground. A done deal. 38 years in tax accounting teaches you something. You learn what people look like when they're hoping you won't audit them too carefully. And let me tell you something else. If you're a parent watching this, and you ever feel that little voice telling you something doesn't add up, please listen to it. That voice is not paranoia. That voice is 30, 40, 50 years of life experience whispering at you. Trust it. The next morning I got up early, made coffee, waited. Beverly came down the stairs at about 8:15, in a bathrobe. She opened my refrigerator like she'd been doing it for years. She turned around, saw me, and looked, genuinely startled. She was a small woman, mid-60s, not unfriendly exactly, but there was a sharpness in her eyes I recognized from 38 years of audit meetings. She said, "Oh, you must be Lauren's father." She poured herself a cup of coffee, from my coffee maker, with my beans, which I order from a small roaster in the North End. She sat down at my kitchen table. I said yes. I was Lauren's father. I was also the man whose name was on the deed and the property tax bills. She smiled, like I'd told a joke at a dinner party. She said Lauren had told her so much about me. She said I had a beautiful home. I thanked her. Then I asked her what her plan was for finding her own place. She said she was still looking. She said the Boston market was just so expensive. She said she appreciated my patience, And here is where I want to stop and tell you something I learned. Sometimes you have to correct people gently but immediately. So I told her, very calmly, that I had not actually offered any patience. I asked her to have a specific timeline by Friday. She stopped smiling then. The lock, by the way, had not been fully removed by morning. Trevor had taken the deadbolt off, but he'd left a hook-and-eye latch on the inside of the door. And most of Beverly's belongings were still arranged throughout that room. A suitcase open on the floor. Toiletries lined up on Diane's old desk. A pair of pink slippers next to her reading chair. I went down to the utility room. My files were stacked in cardboard boxes on top of the chest freezer. My old framed photographs were in another box. The one of Diane and me at Acadia had been laid flat, face down, on top of a stack. I stood there in that cold concrete utility room for a long time. I'm a man who doesn't cry in front of people. I cried alone down there for about 90 seconds. Then I wiped my face, and I went back upstairs. And I called my attorney. Her name is Margaret. She's handled my legal affairs for 15 years. She's sharp, she's blunt, and she doesn't waste my time. I explained everything. She asked precise questions. She told me what I could and could not do legally, given that Lauren and Trevor had been residing there for 2.5 years. Under Massachusetts general laws, Chapter 186, long-term residents, even unpaying family members, can have certain protections. I would need to give formal written notice, 30 days minimum. She told me Beverly, who had no formal arrangement at all, was in a much weaker position. She told me to document everything, every conversation, every email, every text. So I did. I took photographs of the utility room. I photographed the modified study door. I wrote down dates and quotes in a yellow legal pad. Then I did something I probably should have done 18 months earlier. I called an old colleague who still works in fraud risk assessment for a mid-size firm. I asked him if he'd ever heard the name Trevor Whitaker, formerly with a logistics consulting outfit in Quincy. He called me back the very next morning. Trevor had been let go from that position 14 months before he and Lauren moved into my house. The reason was not company restructuring, which is what Lauren had told me at the time. He'd been terminated following an internal forensic audit. No criminal charges had been filed. Sometimes companies don't, when they want to avoid the publicity of a trial. But the issue had involved misappropriation of corporate travel and entertainment expenses over roughly 16 months. The total was not small. Mid-5 figures. I sat with that information for an entire day. And I want to be careful here, because I am not telling you this to paint Trevor as a monster. People do desperate things when they're frightened. I've seen it in my own clients for almost 4 decades. But I had let this man live in my house for 2.5 years. I had loaned my daughter money twice. Once for what she called car repairs. Once for what she called a dental emergency. Total of about $11,000. I had believed her, because she was my daughter. And honestly, you want to believe your daughter. If you are a parent watching this video, and you've ever loaned money to your kids without asking too many questions, I am not judging you. I did the same thing. But I want you to ask yourself one hard question tonight. Where did that money actually go? You may not like the answer. You should still ask. That evening, I asked Lauren to sit with me out in the backyard. We took the 2 old Adirondack chairs under the Japanese maple. The October light was that soft amber color you only get in New England in the fall. I just looked at her for a while before saying anything, and I noticed. She looked tired. Not adult tired. Worn down tired. Erosion tired. I'd been mistaking it for maturity for over a year. I asked her to tell me the real story about Trevor's job, not the version she'd given me before. She stared up at the maple leaves. They were turning red against the late sun. Then she told me. Not everything, but enough. She confirmed he'd been fired. She confirmed there had been an issue with expenses. She said it had been complicated. She told me they'd been carrying significant debt ever since. Credit cards. A personal loan. She said she was sorry she hadn't told me. I asked her where the money I'd given her had actually gone. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, some of it had gone toward what they owed on those cards. I nodded. I sat there under that tree, and let me tell you what I felt. Grief, pure grief, not anger, grief, the kind you feel at a funeral. Because something had died between me and my daughter, and I hadn't even noticed it dying. I told her that I loved her. I told her that hadn't changed. Then I told her that I needed all three of them to leave the house. She started to explain why that wasn't possible. The market, Beverly, Trevor's job hunt, their savings, the school year. I let her finish every word. Then I told her I'd already spoken with Margaret. I told her I understood my legal obligations as a homeowner, and I was prepared to meet every single one. They would receive 60 days of formal written notice, drafted by my attorney, served properly. Beverly, who had no agreement with me whatsoever, would need to make other arrangements within 2 weeks. Lauren said I was being cruel, and I want to repeat what I said to her, because I'm proud of it. I told her that installing a deadbolt on my study door while I was in a hospital bed, without a single phone call, was also a form of cruelty. I told her that deciding what to tell me, and what to hide from me, was also a form of cruelty. I told her I wasn't saying these things to punish her. I was saying them because they were true, and our family had never been the kind of family. That pretended truth didn't matter. She cried then. I let her cry. I didn't hold it against her. I dealt with Trevor separately the next morning, coffee at the kitchen table, both cups going cold between us. I told him exactly what I knew about the Quincy job. I didn't embellish anything. I didn't have to. He didn't deny much. He said he'd been planning to tell me eventually. I told him eventually had passed. I told him I expected him to behave with basic decency toward Lauren during this transition, whatever happened between them after. He said he would. I half believed him. I dealt with Beverly last. I told her she had 2 weeks. I gave her a printed list of subsidized senior housing options across Worcester County and the South Shore, programs through Massachusetts Executive Office of Elder Affairs. I told her I didn't bear her any personal ill will. She wasn't responsible for her son's decisions. She took the list. She left 12 days later. A woman I assumed was a friend picked her up in a silver Camry. She didn't say goodbye, and honestly, I was fine with that. Now, I want to talk to you about something that I think a lot of older parents in America never think about until it's too late: estate planning and elder law. If you own your home outright, and you have adult children living with you, please go talk to an estate attorney this week. Not next year, this week. In Massachusetts, there are specific protections under MGL Chapter 19A, the Elder Abuse Reporting Law. There's also Financial Exploitation Statute. Your local council on aging can connect you to free legal resources. The Boston Bar Association offers low-cost referrals. Use them. Over the following weeks, while Lauren and Trevor sorted out their logistics for moving, I'll spare you those details. They belong to them more than to me. I started reassembling my study. The very first thing I brought up from the utility room was Diane's wingback chair. I sat in it, in an empty room, before I moved anything else back. The afternoon light came through that east window the way it always had. The maple was turning gold and red outside the window, and I sat in my dead wife's reading chair and I thought, I am still here. This room is still here. She is still, somehow, still here. I want to say something about forgiveness, because people always want to know about that part. Lauren and I still speak. We have dinner together about once a month at a little Italian place in the South End. Her suggestion: neutral ground. A good one. She's seeing a therapist now, working through things. Trevor is no longer in the picture. They separated about 4 months after they moved out, and while I am not sorry about that, I told Lauren I would not say so out loud, because saying so wouldn't help her. The $11,000. I wrote that off a long time ago. Margaret rewrote my will in November. Lauren is still in it. Not all of it, but enough. I decided she deserved a second chance at being my daughter. I am still figuring out what that means. If you're in this situation right now, here is what I want you to know. You don't have to choose between being a good parent and being a person with dignity. Those are not opposing values. The mistake most people make is thinking that loving your children means letting them take whatever they want from you. That's not love. That's surrender. Love has edges. Love has a structure. Love can say no, not like this, and still be love. What I have now is what I had before any of this happened. My house, my study, Diane's chair, the Japanese maple in my backyard that I planted when the world felt simpler. That maple does not care about any of the things that happen inside the house. Some mornings I take my coffee at the kitchen table. I look out at it, and I think, that is not nothing. That is actually quite a lot. So here's a real question for you to sit with tonight. If you had to choose between keeping the peace with your family and keeping your own self-respect, which one would you pick? And the harder question, which one have you already been picking? If you're watching this, and you've let someone stay just a little too long, or believed something because it was easier than asking, I am not here to judge you. I did the same thing for years. I just want you to know that it is possible to take back what is yours. Not perfectly, not without cost, but with your dignity intact. That is what I came home to in the end. Now before you go, I want to hear from you. Comment 1 if you think I did the right thing standing my ground the way I did. Comment 2 if you think Lauren deserved a faster forgiveness than I gave her. Comment 3 if you have ever lived through something like this yourself, with your own family. And right after that, tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country, what time it is for you right now. I read these comments every single morning with my coffee, and I love seeing the little map of people who tuned in, from Texas to Toronto to Tokyo. Drop your story. I read every single one. Historia ficticia inspirada en casos comunes, pero 100% reescrita por mí en Boston para evitar contenido reciclado. Los nombres, lugares y detalles han sido cambiados completamente. If this story spoke to you in any way, please hit that like button. It really does help the channel. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. I publish a new story every week. Real lessons, real second chances, real people standing back up. Thank you for being here with me today. Take care of yourself, and take care of what's yours.